On their wedding night, her husband said, "I'm tired," and they didn't sleep together. But at midnight she heard moans coming from her mother-in-law's room. What she saw shattered her. "Hi, my beautiful family. Today I lift a prayer for each of you. May God wrap every woman in strength, grace, and radiant beauty that never fades. May every man walk with wisdom, kindness, and courage. May every child be surrounded by laughter, light, and protection wherever they go. I pray your homes overflow with peace, your hearts with love, and your days with endless hope. May your struggles turn into stepping stones, your tears into blessings, and your dreams into shining realities. May love bind your family so tightly that nothing in this world can break you apart. My family, you are my heartbeat, the soul of my stories, and the reason I never give up. If your heart is with me, write, present. If your love is true, write, I am with Mr. Peter. Some betrayals don't just break you, they remake you into something your enemies will never recognize. Tammy Owens lay perfectly still in the darkness, listening to her husband breathe on the other side of the bed. The silk sheets felt cold against her skin, despite the warmth of the summer night. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times during their courtship. The wedding night, the beginning of forever. She had not imagined this silence. "I'm tired," Jamie Green had said, barely looking at her before turning his back. No kiss, no touch, no explanation. Just those 2 words, delivered with the emotional warmth of a weather report, before he'd pulled the covers up and left her alone in the darkness. Tammy stared at the ceiling of the master bedroom, counting the shadows cast by moonlight through the curtains. The wedding had been everything she'd dreamed of. 300 guests had watched them exchange vows beneath crystal chandeliers. Her dress had been custom-made, flowing white silk that made her feel like she was floating. The reception had lasted until midnight, filled with champagne toasts and dancing and promises of happiness. But now, lying next to her husband of barely 6 hours, Tammy felt more alone than she'd ever been in her life. She told herself it meant nothing. He was tired. The wedding had been exhausting. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow he would hold her and apologize, and they would laugh about this awkward first night. Tomorrow would be better. Then she heard it. A low moan, muffled by walls, but unmistakable. Coming from down the hall, Tammy's breath caught. She sat up slowly, listening. There it was again, followed by whispered laughter. A woman's voice, breathy and intimate, coming from Jolene Green's room. Jamie's mother. Ice flooded Tammy's veins. She glanced at Jamie, but he hadn't moved. His breathing remained steady, unchanged. Either he was deeply asleep or he was pretending to be. The sounds continued, intimate sounds that made Tammy's stomach twist into knots. She slipped out of bed as quietly as possible. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold marble floor as she moved toward the door. She should go back to bed. She should ignore it. Whatever was happening in Jolene's room was none of her concern. But something pulled her forward. Some instinct that screamed danger, that warned her she needed to know the truth. The hallway was dark, except for a thin line of light beneath Jolene's door. As Tammy approached, the sounds grew clearer. Unmistakable now, the rhythmic creak of a bed, heavy breathing, whispered words she couldn't quite make out. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. Part of her wanted to turn back, to return to the master bedroom, and pretend she'd heard nothing. But a larger part, the part that had survived growing up poor and alone, the part that had learned to trust her instincts, that part knew she had to look. The door was cracked open, just slightly, just enough. Tammy pushed it wider. The scene burned itself into her memory like a brand pressed against bare skin. Jamie, her husband, tangled in sheets with another woman. A woman Tammy recognized immediately, Brielle Hartwick. The family friend who'd given a touching toast at the reception about love and loyalty and forever. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Jolene Green, sitting in the corner armchair with a glass of wine, watching with the satisfied smile of someone enjoying a private performance. Time seemed to stop. Tammy stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. Any moment she would wake up in bed next to Jamie and realize it was all just wedding night anxiety manifesting as terrible dreams. But then Jolene turned her head and looked directly at Tammy. "Oh," she said, her voice calm and unbothered, as if Tammy had merely interrupted afternoon tea. "You weren't supposed to see this yet, dear. Yet." That single word hung in the air like poison gas, choking Tammy with its implications. This was planned. This was intentional. This was not some terrible accident or moment of weakness. This was always going to happen. Jamie finally looked at her then, not with shock or shame or regret. His eyes were cold, flat, empty of anything resembling the man who'd spoken wedding vows to her that very evening. "Close the door," he said. Not a request, a command. Something inside Tammy shattered, not her heart, though that broke too. Something deeper, something fundamental. The part of her that believed people were essentially good. The part that trusted in promises and love and the sanctity of marriage. The part that thought she mattered. That part died in that doorway. Brielle giggled, actually giggled, as if this were all some amusing game. Jolene took a sip of her wine, her eyes never leaving Tammy's face. She was studying her, measuring her reaction, waiting to see what the poor little bride would do now that she'd discovered the truth. Tammy could scream. She could rage. She could throw things and demand explanations and make them all face what they'd done, but she did none of those things. Instead, she stepped back into the hallway, pulled the door closed, and walked away with steady, measured steps. Behind her, she heard Jolene's voice, muffled but clear enough. Well, that went easier than expected. Then laughter. Jamie's laughter mixing with Brielle's, as if Tammy's humiliation was the punchline to a joke they'd all been telling. Tammy walked back to the master bedroom. She didn't cry. Tears felt too small for what she was feeling. This was beyond tears. This was something colder, harder, more permanent. She pulled her suitcase from the closet and began packing. Not everything, just the essentials. Her mother's necklace, the only thing she had left of the woman who died when Tammy was young. Her college diploma, a few changes of clothes, the small amount of cash she'd saved before the wedding, money she'd hidden away because some instinct had told her to always have an escape plan. That instinct had been right. As dawn broke over the Green family estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Tammy walked out the front door. She carried one small bag and wore jeans and a t-shirt. She'd left her wedding dress crumpled on the bedroom floor like a discarded dream. She paused at the kitchen counter and pulled out a notepad. For a moment, she considered writing something long and detailed, explaining her pain and disappointment and shattered trust. But they didn't deserve her pain. They didn't deserve her words, so she wrote only this: "I will never beg for your love. Watch me rise." She left the note where Jamie would find it and walked out into the morning light. Behind her, the Green mansion stood silent and imposing, a monument to old money and older cruelty. Inside, Jamie slept soundly in his mother's guest room. Brielle curled against him, both of them content in their betrayal. None of them knew they had just made the greatest mistake of their lives. None of them knew that the woman walking away from them, shoulders squared and eyes dry, would one day become more powerful than all of them combined. None of them knew they hadn't destroyed Tammy Owens. They had created her. The sun rose higher as Tammy reached the end of the long driveway. She turned back once, taking a final look at the house that had promised her a future and delivered only devastation. "Watch me," she whispered to the empty air. "Watch me rise from these ashes you made." Then she turned away and walked toward the bus stop, toward the unknown, toward a future she would build with her own hands. And in that moment, though she didn't know it yet, the phoenix began to burn. Chapter 2. Surviving the Wasteland. 3 months of hell taught Tammy something the Greens never learned. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's the strongest foundation you'll ever build on. The first night, she slept on a bench at the bus station. The second night, an old friend from college let her crash on a couch that smelled like cigarettes and broken promises. By the end of the first week, Tammy had found a room above a laundromat, barely big enough for a mattress on the floor, where the constant rumble of washing machines shook the walls and invaded her dreams. She didn't cry. Not once. Crying felt like giving them what they wanted. Proof that they'd broken her. Proof that she was weak. So instead, she swallowed the pain and turned it into something harder. Something that could cut through steel if she sharpened it right. The work came in pieces. Rosie's diner hired her as a waitress for the morning shift. The pay was terrible, but the tips were decent if you smiled enough and pretended you cared about strangers' breakfast preferences. At night, she cleaned office buildings, pushing a mop through empty corridors while security guards dozed at their desks. On weekends, she set up a small table at the local market, selling jewelry she made from wire and salvaged materials. Her hands blistered, her feet ached, her back screamed every time she bent over to pick up someone else's trash. But she kept moving forward because the alternative was going back. And she'd rather die than give Jolene Green the satisfaction. On a cold morning at the market, when frost still clung to the grass and Tammy's fingers were numb despite her worn gloves, an older woman stopped at her table. She was elegant in a way that had nothing to do with expensive clothes and everything to do with how she carried herself. Her grey hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her eyes were sharp and measuring. "You made these?" the woman asked, holding up a necklace Tammy had twisted from copper wire and pieces of broken glass she'd found near a demolition site. "Yes, ma'am," Tammy said. The woman studied the necklace in the morning light, turning it slowly. "This is extraordinary work. You have an eye for finding beauty in broken things." "I learned from experience." The woman's gaze sharpened. "You're running from something." Tammy met her eyes steadily. "I'm running toward something." A smile ghosted across the woman's lips. "Good answer." She set the necklace down and pulled a business card from her purse. "I'm Opal Crenshaw. I own a gallery downtown. I sell work from local artists on consignment. If you're interested, I'll take your pieces. 60-40 split in your favor." Tammy's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why would you do that?" "Because I was where you are once. Broken and furious and determined to prove everyone wrong." Opal's eyes softened. "And because talent like yours doesn't come along often. I'd be a fool to let it walk away." "I'm not broken," Tammy said quietly. "No," Opal agreed. "You're not. You're rebuilding. There's a difference." That handshake changed everything. Within 2 weeks, Tammy's jewelry was displayed in Opal's gallery alongside work from established artists. Within a month, she'd sold enough pieces to move into a slightly better room, one with a window and a door that actually locked. Within 2 months, she was making more from her jewelry than from the diner and cleaning jobs combined. But she kept all 3 jobs anyway, because security wasn't about having enough. It was about having more than enough. It was about never being vulnerable again. Opal introduced her to other people who'd clawed their way up from nothing. Dante Livingston ran a metalworking shop in the warehouse district and taught Tammy advanced techniques for shaping wire and setting stones. Thora Beckwith designed clothes for women who couldn't afford the big fashion houses, but still wanted to feel beautiful. And she started featuring Tammy's jewelry in her shows. Cyrus Malone had built himself from bankruptcy to success and back to success again. And he taught Tammy about numbers and margins and how to turn passion into sustainability. "You've got something rare," Cyrus told her one evening over cheap coffee at the diner where she still worked mornings. "Most people who've been through trauma let it define them. You're letting it refine you." "I don't have a choice," Tammy said. "Everyone has a choice. You're choosing to fight. That's different than just surviving." Tammy saved every dollar she could. She lived on rice and beans and day-old bread from the bakery down the street. She wore clothes from thrift stores, patched and mended until they couldn't be patched anymore. Every spare moment went into her jewelry, her hands moving in the dim light of her tiny room. creating beauty from discarded things. People who saw her working 3 jobs and barely sleeping thought she was desperate. They didn't understand that she wasn't desperate. She was determined. There was a difference. One morning, Tammy walked past a small storefront with peeling paint and dirty windows. The building looked forgotten, abandoned, like it had given up on itself. A faded "For Rent" sign hung crooked in the window. She stopped and stared at it for a long time. That afternoon, she met with the landlord. He was old and tired and didn't seem to care much about anything except getting rent on time. "It's been empty for 2 years, he said, jangling keys as he unlocked the door. "Needs work, needs cleaning, needs everything really." Tammy stepped inside. The space smelled like mildew and broken dreams. Paint peeled from the walls. Water stains marked the ceiling. The wooden floor was scratched and warped, but the light was perfect. Large windows faced east, letting in the morning sun. The space was open and full of possibility. "I'll take it," she said. The landlord looked surprised. "You haven't even asked about the price." "I'll make it work." She signed the lease with hands that didn't shake. Every dollar she'd saved, every extra shift she'd worked, every piece of jewelry she'd sold went into that first month's rent and deposit. She spent 2 weeks cleaning and painting. Dante helped her install better lighting. Thora donated some display cases from her studio. Opal spread the word to every artist and craftsperson she knew. On opening day, Tammy stood in front of the storefront and hung the sign she'd made herself, painted carefully in letters that didn't waver. "Phoenix Artisan Collective," Opal read aloud, smiling. "Rising from the ashes." "Something like that," Tammy said. The first day, 17 people walked through the door. Some browsed, some bought. Some just wanted to see what this new place was about. Tammy made $400, standing behind the counter that night, counting the bills with hands that finally stopped hurting. Tammy thought about Jamie and Jolene. She wondered if they ever thought about her, if they ever wondered what happened to the woman they'd thrown away. She hoped they did. She hoped they thought she was broken and desperate and crawling through life, because one day they would learn the truth. One day they would see what she'd become, and on that day, she wanted the shock to hit them like a physical blow. Her first employee was a woman named Shiloh Reeves, a single mother who needed flexible hours and understanding. She came to the collective with a resume full of gaps and eyes that said she'd been through her own hell. "I can't pay much yet," Tammy admitted during the interview. "You're giving me a chance," Shiloh said quietly. "That's worth more than money right now." I know the feeling. They understood each other without saying more. Both of them were rebuilding from rubble. Both of them knew what it meant to be underestimated and discarded. "When do I start?" Shiloh asked. "Tomorrow morning, if you can." Shiloh's smile was small but genuine. "I'll be here." After she left, Tammy stood in the quiet shop and allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Not happiness, not yet, but satisfaction. The grim pleasure of knowing she was building something real from nothing. The phoenix wasn't fully risen yet, but the flames were growing stronger. Chapter 3. The First Empire. Phoenix Artisan Collective opened on a Tuesday morning when rain drummed against the windows and the sky was the color of slate. Tammy unlocked the door at dawn, her heart hammering with equal parts terror and determination. By noon, she'd made her first sale. A young couple bought a bracelet for their daughter. By evening, she'd sold enough to cover the next day's expenses. By the end of the first month, she'd sold enough to hire Shiloh full-time. The collective became a gathering place for artists who worked with their hands and their hearts. People who knew what it meant to create something from nothing. Tammy featured local craftspeople, taking only a small percentage and giving them the exposure they needed. In return, they brought their customers, their friends, their families. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. The local newspaper ran a small story about the new shop. A lifestyle blogger featured Tammy's jewelry. Someone posted photos on social media, and they spread like wildfire. Within a year, Tammy opened a second location across town. Within 2 years, a third. By the end of the third year, she had 5 locations scattered across the state, each one staffed by people who needed a second chance, who understood that survival was a choice you made every single day. But Tammy wasn't content with just the collective. She'd learned something important during those early months of struggle. Beautiful things shouldn't only be affordable to the wealthy, but wealthy people would pay premium prices if you gave them premium quality. So she created 2 brands. Phoenix Artisans stayed accessible, selling pieces that working people could afford. But she launched a second line under her own name, Owens, simple, elegant, powerful. Owens pieces were made from gold and silver and precious stones. They were sold in department stores in cities Tammy had never even visited. They were featured in magazines with glossy pages and impossible standards. They were worn by women who had everything but still wanted more. The money poured in, not quickly but steadily, like water filling a well day after day, until suddenly you looked down and realized you'd created an ocean. Tammy bought a manufacturing facility, hired 200 people, created a training program for young artists who couldn't afford formal education, established a scholarship fund for women trying to escape bad situations. She moved into a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. She bought a car that turned heads. She wore clothes that cost more than she used to make in a month. But she never forgot what it felt like to sleep on that mattress above the laundromat, hearing the machines rumble through the night, wondering if she'd have enough money for food tomorrow. She kept that first room, in fact, paid the rent every month even though she never stayed there. It sat empty, a reminder of where she'd started, a promise to herself that she'd never go soft, never forget what it took to climb out of hell. Reporters wanted to interview her. They called her the self-made mogul who built an empire from broken pieces. They asked about her background, her inspiration, her vision for the future. She told them about growing up with nothing, about learning to create beauty from scraps, about believing in herself when nobody else did. She never mentioned the Greens, never spoke about a wedding or a husband or a betrayal that had burned her down to nothing. That part of her life was dead and buried, and she intended to keep it that way. Tell us about your personal life, a journalist asked during one interview. Are you married, dating? What drives you when you're not building your empire? Tammy smiled the way she'd practiced in the mirror, warm but revealing nothing. I'm married to my work. That's enough for now. It was enough. It had to be enough. Because letting someone close meant being vulnerable. And vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her assistant, Romy Caldwell, was the only person who saw behind the carefully constructed walls. Romy had been with her for years, starting as a receptionist at the second location and working her way up through pure competence and loyalty. One evening, long after everyone else had gone home, Romy found Tammy still at her desk, reviewing designs for the new collection. You know it's past midnight, right? Romy said, leaning against the doorframe. Is it? Tammy didn't look up from her sketches. When was the last time you took a day off? I don't remember. That's what I thought. Romy walked in and sat down across from her. You're going to burn out. I've already burned. This is what rose from the ashes. Even phoenixes need to rest sometimes. Tammy finally looked up, meeting Romy's concerned eyes. If I rest, I remember. If I slow down, I think about things I'd rather forget. So I keep moving forward. It's worked pretty well so far, has it? Romy asked quietly. Because from where I'm sitting, you've built an incredible empire. But you're living in it alone. Alone is safe. Alone is lonely. I prefer lonely to betrayed. Romy was quiet for a moment. She knew better than to push too hard. Just promise me you'll think about it. About letting people in. About living, not just surviving. I'll think about it, Tammy lied. After Romy left, Tammy returned to her sketches, but her mind wandered despite her best efforts. She thought about Jamie sometimes, late at night when exhaustion lowered her defenses. Wondered if he was happy with Brielle. Wondered if Jolene was still pulling the strings of his life like he was nothing more than a puppet. Wondered if they ever thought about her. Probably not. She'd been disposable to them, a nobody from nowhere, with nothing to offer except her naive belief in love and promises. Tammy touched her ring finger, bare for years now. She'd thrown her wedding ring in a river the day after she left, watched it sink beneath the dark water and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not sadness. Just nothing. That numbness had been useful. It let her focus, let her build without distraction. But sometimes, in quiet moments like this, she wondered if she'd thrown away more than just a ring. If she'd thrown away her ability to feel anything real. The phone on her desk rang. It was late for calls, but in her world, someone was always working, always needing something. "Tammy Owens," she answered. "Miss Owens, this is Griffith Foundation. We're organizing our annual charity gala, and we'd love to have you as our keynote speaker. It's our biggest event of the year, and we think your story would inspire our donors." Tammy almost said no. She hated public events, hated putting herself on display, hated pretending to be something she wasn't. But then she thought about the exposure, about the donors who could fund her scholarship program, about the young women who needed to hear that survival was possible. "What's the date?" she asked. As the coordinator gave her the details, Tammy wrote them down with steady hands. A gala, the elite gathering to pat themselves on the back for their charitable donations. The kind of event the Greens would have attended back when they were still important, back when people cared about their name. "I'll do it," Tammy said. She hung up and returned to her sketches, pushing away the strange feeling in her chest. It felt almost like anticipation, like some part of her knew that accepting this invitation would change everything. But she ignored it. She'd learned to ignore feelings. Feelings were dangerous. Feelings made you weak. She'd learned that lesson on her wedding night, and she'd never forgotten it. Outside her window, the city glittered with 1,000,000 lights, each one representing someone's dream, someone's hope, someone's desperate climb toward something better. Tammy Owens had climbed higher than most, and she wasn't done rising yet. Chapter 4. The House of Green Collapses. While Tammy built her empire, the Green family discovered what happens when foundations rot from within. Houses built on lies eventually crumble, and theirs was no exception. The first crack appeared in the form of a journalist named Kai Sutherland. He'd been investigating corruption in old money families for years, piecing together patterns that others missed. When he started looking into the Greens, he found a trail of destruction that went back decades. What started as routine research had uncovered something far darker than he'd anticipated. The article ran on a Tuesday morning. The headline was simple and devastating: "The Green Family, a Legacy of Lies." Jolene Green woke to find her phone exploding with calls and messages. By noon, the article had been shared thousands of times. By evening, it was national news. News anchors discussed it during prime time. Social media dissected every detail. The Green name, once synonymous with power and prestige, became synonymous with corruption and cruelty. Kai Sutherland had documented everything with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a crusader. The business deals Jolene had sabotaged through blackmail. The competitors she'd destroyed with manufactured scandals. The families she'd ruined because they dared to challenge her social standing. The careers she'd ended with a whispered word in the right ear. The web of manipulation she'd spun over decades, pulling strings and crushing anyone who threatened the Green legacy. He had proof. Documents, recordings, testimony from dozens of people who'd finally found the courage to speak. Former employees who'd been forced to participate in schemes they didn't understand. Rivals who'd been destroyed and spent years rebuilding. Families who'd lost everything because they dared to stand in Jolene's way. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, damning. "Mother, we need to respond to this," Jamie said, standing in her apartment that had once been a mansion bedroom. Even their home had been seized, sold to cover debts that kept mounting. The walls here were thin, the furniture cheap, the view overlooking a parking lot instead of manicured gardens. Respond? Jolene laughed, but it sounded hollow, brittle, like glass about to shatter. What would you have me say? That the truth isn't the truth? That everyone who spoke against me is lying? That you could deny it? I could, but we both know it wouldn't matter. She poured herself a glass of wine with shaking hands, the bottle-cheap supermarket brand instead of the imported vintages she'd once collected. The world loves to watch the powerful fall. They've been waiting for this, praying for it, and now they have their spectacle. The calls came fast after that. Investors withdrawing their support, their voices cold and businesslike, where once they'd been warm and deferential. Partners terminating contracts with legal letters full of clauses about moral character and public image. Social clubs revoking memberships, the same clubs where Jolene had once held court like royalty. Jolene Green, who had once been the queen of society, became its pariah overnight. Invitations stopped coming. Old friends crossed the street to avoid her. Her name became something people whispered about in scandalized tones. But the real damage hit Jamie. His company, which had been propped up by his mother's connections and his wife Brielle's family money, collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. The Hartwick family, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, pulled their support completely. Publicly, brutally, they issued statements condemning the Greens, claiming they'd been deceived, that they'd had no knowledge of Jolene's activities. Brielle filed for divorce the same week, with a statement released to the press that made headlines of its own. I was deceived by the Green family, she said in her statement. Their corruption, their manipulation, their complete lack of moral character was hidden from me. I'm grateful the truth has finally come to light, and I'm relieved to be free from their influence. Jamie read the statement in his empty office, surrounded by boxes of his belongings that would be cleared out by end of day. She'd stood beside him at that wedding, laughing at Tammy's humiliation. She'd shared his bed while his actual wife slept alone down the hall. And now she was rewriting history, painting herself as a victim instead of an accomplice. The lies came so easily to her, so naturally, that Jamie wondered if she even recognized them as lies anymore. You getting all this packed up? The building manager asked, poking his head through the door. Security needs you out by 5. I'll be done, Jamie said numbly, staring at the boxes that held the remnants of a life he no longer recognized as his own. The mansion was seized to cover debts. The cars were sold at auction, strangers sitting in seats where generations of Greens had sat. The bank accounts were frozen pending investigation into whether the money had been obtained through his mother's schemes. What that had hung in the family for generations went to collectors. Furniture that had been custom-made sold for pennies on the dollar. Everything Jamie had inherited, everything he'd taken for granted, vanished like smoke in a strong wind. He moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood he'd never even driven through before. The walls were thin enough that he could hear his neighbors' conversations, their arguments, their lives bleeding through the cheap construction. The plumbing rattled. The heating worked sporadically. His neighbors yelled at all hours, their problems becoming his problems through sheer proximity. He'd gone from sleeping in a bedroom bigger than most people's entire homes to sleeping on a mattress that came with the furnished rental. Lumpy and uncomfortable and smelling faintly of other people's lives. The job offers stopped coming. Nobody wanted to hire someone with the Green name attached to them, not anymore. The name that had once opened every door now closed them all. Eventually, after weeks of rejection, he took a position managing a retail store in a strip mall. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and food. His co-workers were half his age and treated him with polite indifference, unaware of who he'd once been, uninterested in his fall from grace. Every morning, Jamie woke up and looked at himself in the scratched bathroom mirror and tried to remember the man he'd been. The man with everything. The man who'd thought himself untouchable. The man who'd believed his name and his money made him better than others. That man was gone, replaced by this hollow shell who counted register drawers and dealt with customer complaints about return policies. who apologized for things that weren't his fault, and smiled until his face hurt and went home to an empty apartment that smelled like failure. But worse than the poverty, worse than the humiliation, worse than watching his entire life disintegrate like wet paper, was the knowledge that he'd destroyed the one real thing he'd ever had. He saw Tammy's name everywhere, on billboards advertising her jewelry, her face glowing with success, in magazine articles about successful entrepreneurs who'd built empires from nothing, on social media posts from women wearing Owens pieces and talking about how they made them feel powerful, beautiful, unstoppable. Each mention was a reminder of what he'd thrown away, what he'd destroyed with his cruelty and cowardice. She'd become everything he'd never believed she could be. Everything his mother had said was impossible for someone like her. Someone with no connections, no family name, no inheritance. Someone who'd started with nothing and built everything through sheer force of will. She'd done it all herself, while he'd lost everything that had been handed to him on a silver platter. One night, unable to sleep in his cramped apartment while his neighbor's television blared through the wall, Jamie pulled out his laptop and searched for her. There were dozens of photos, hundreds. Tammy at charity events, wearing gowns that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Tammy cutting ribbons at new store openings, surrounded by people who admired her. Tammy accepting awards for entrepreneurship and innovation, giving speeches that inspired thousands. In every photo, she looked powerful, confident, complete. In every photo, she looked nothing like the uncertain young woman he'd discarded on their wedding night. He wondered if she ever thought about him, if she ever saw his name attached to the scandal and felt satisfaction at his fall, if she even cared enough to check what had become of the man who'd thrown her away like she was nothing. Probably not. He'd been nothing to her in the end, just like she'd been nothing to him in the beginning. The difference was she'd turned her nothing into everything, and he'd turned his everything into nothing. She'd proven everyone wrong, while he'd proven everyone right. Jamie, his mother's voice came through the phone one evening, breaking months of silence between them. "I need money." "I don't have any money, Mother. Don't lie to me. You must have something saved. I'm living in a hovel. Do you understand? Me, Jolene Green, in a one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and broken heating, with neighbors who blast music at all hours and hallways that smell like cooking grease. I'm living in a studio apartment and working retail. I have nothing to give you. This is your fault," she hissed, her voice sharp with familiar venom. "If you'd handled that girl properly from the beginning, none of this would have happened. If you'd just stayed away from her after the wedding, if you'd divorced her quietly like I told you to, we'd still have everything." Something in Jamie snapped. "Her name is Tammy, and she wasn't the problem. We were, you and me. We destroyed everything good and now we're paying for it. How dare you? No, I'm done, Mother. I'm done with your excuses and your manipulation and your refusal to take responsibility for anything. You destroyed our family. You destroyed our name. You destroyed me. And I let you do it because I was too weak to stand up to you." He hung up before she could respond. Blocked her number, sat in the silence of his tiny apartment and realized he'd just cut the last tie to his old life, the final thread connecting him to everything he'd once been. It should have felt liberating. Instead, it just felt empty, like cutting off a diseased limb, necessary but painful. That night, scrolling through news on his phone, Jamie saw an announcement that made his heart stop. The Griffith Foundation Gala, the annual event where the city's elite gathered to donate and network and congratulate themselves on their generosity. And this year's keynote speaker, Tammy Owens. He stared at her photo for a long time. She was smiling, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Even through the glossy professional photo, he could see it. The hardness, the walls, the armor she'd built to protect herself from people like him. From betrayal, from cruelty, from the kind of pain he'd inflicted. Before he could think too hard about it, Jamie purchased a ticket to the gala. It cost more than he should spend, more than was reasonable given his situation. He'd have to eat ramen for 2 weeks to make up for it. Skip meals. Walked to work instead of taking the bus, but he had to see her, had to face her, had to try to say something, anything, to make up for what he'd done. He didn't expect forgiveness. He didn't deserve it, but maybe, just maybe, he could at least apologize. Could look her in the eye and tell her he knew what he'd destroyed. Could show her that he understood finally what he'd thrown away. The gala was weeks away. Jamie marked it on his calendar and tried not to think about what would happen when he stood in the same room as the woman whose life he'd shattered, only to watch her rise higher than he'd ever climbed. Chapter 5. The Gala Confrontation. Fate doesn't believe in coincidence. It believes in reckoning. The Griffith Foundation Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Imperial Hotel, a space so vast and glittering it felt like stepping into another world. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The floor was polished marble that reflected the lights above. 300 of the city's wealthiest and most influential people filled the room. Dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, Jamie Green stood near the bar in a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit, feeling like an imposter among kings. He'd arrived early, partly from nervousness and partly because he wanted to see her the moment she walked in. He didn't have to wait long. Tammy entered at precisely the appointed time, and the room seemed to pause. She wore a gown the color of molten gold that caught the light with every movement. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo. Diamond earrings glittered at her throat. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd earned her place there, not someone who'd been born into it. Jamie's breath caught in his chest. This was not the uncertain young woman who'd believed in his promises. This was someone entirely new. Someone forged in fire and tempered by betrayal into something harder than steel. She was magnificent. For the first hour, Jamie watched from a distance as Tammy worked the room. She spoke with senators and philanthropists, artists and activists. She laughed at appropriate moments, listened with genuine interest, commanded attention without demanding it. People gravitated to her like moths to flame, wanting to be near her light. Finally, as the crowd began settling for dinner, Jamie found his courage. Or perhaps he'd simply run out of excuses. He crossed the ballroom, weaving between tables, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Tammy was mid-conversation with an older man Jamie vaguely recognized as someone important. She was gesturing with one hand, making a point when she stopped. Her eyes tracked across the room and locked onto Jamie's. For a moment, neither moved. The man she'd been talking to said something, but Tammy didn't respond. She simply stared at Jamie, her expression unreadable. No shock, no anger, no recognition of any feeling at all. Just those cold, assessing eyes measuring him from across the space. Jamie forced himself to keep walking, forced his legs to move, even though every instinct screamed to turn around and run. When he finally stood in front of her, close enough to smell her perfume, something expensive he didn't recognize, the words he'd rehearsed for weeks evaporated from his mind. "Tammy," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The room around them had gone quiet. People were noticing, turning to watch, whispering behind their hands. Everyone knew the story. Everyone remembered what the Greens had done, what they'd lost, how they'd fallen. "Mr. Green," Tammy said coolly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. Not Jamie. Mr. Green, formal and distant as if he were a stranger who'd accidentally bumped into her. "How unexpected. Please, I need to talk to you. We have nothing to discuss. Tammy, please. Just 5 minutes. I'm begging you." Something flickered in her eyes. Not softness, but something colder. Satisfaction, perhaps, at hearing him beg the way she'd never begged him. "No," she said simply, and began to turn away. Jamie felt something break inside him. All the shame, all the regret, all the knowledge of what he'd destroyed came crashing down at once. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees on the marble floor. The entire ballroom gasped. "Tammy, please!" His voice cracked, raw and desperate. "I was wrong. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. I destroyed us." I destroyed everything. Security guards began moving forward, but Tammy raised one hand. Just that gesture, small and controlled, and they stopped. The entire room waited, 300 witnesses holding their breath. She looked down at him with those cold, beautiful eyes. Let him kneel there, let him sob, let the cameras flash and capture this moment of his complete humiliation. Let him feel what she'd felt. "You want to talk?" she finally said, her voice like winter ice. "Then talk." Jamie pressed his forehead to the floor, unable to meet her gaze. "I was a coward. My whole life, my mother controlled everything. Who I married, who I divorced, who I slept with. I let her destroy you because I was too weak to stand up to her. I was too afraid to be my own person. You could have chosen differently. I know." "God, I know." He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face without shame. "I've lost everything, Tammy. My name, my money, my reputation, my soul. But the worst part, the part that keeps me awake every single night, I lost you. And I didn't even realize what I had until it was gone." Memories crashed over Tammy like waves. The sound of his laughter from his mother's room, the coldness in his eyes when he told her to close the door, the way he turned his back on her on their wedding night, like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. "You didn't lose me," she said softly, but her voice carried through the silent ballroom. "You threw me away, like I was garbage, like our vows meant nothing, like I was nothing. I know what I did. I know what I am. And I've regretted it every single day since." Tammy crouched down, forcing him to meet her eyes. She wanted him to see the woman he'd created, the phoenix born from the ashes of his betrayal. "I rose from the ashes you left me in," she said, each word precise and sharp as a blade. "I clawed my way up from nothing. I slept on floors and worked until my hands bled and built myself into something you never believed I could be. And you know what the most beautiful part is?" Jamie shook his head, tears dripping onto his rented shoes. "I don't need your apology. I don't need your regret. I don't need anything from you at all." She stood towering over him in her golden gown. "But if you're genuinely sorry, if this isn't just another performance for an audience, then prove it. Not with tears, not with words, with actions. Show me you've become a man worth forgiving." "How?" he whispered. "Tell me how and I'll do it. Figure it out yourself. That's what I had to do." Tammy turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship. Behind her, Jamie remained on his knees, shattered and sobbing in front of everyone who mattered in this city. She didn't look back, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing if his pain affected her. She simply walked out of the ballroom with her head high and her back straight, leaving him exactly the way he'd left her, broken and alone with nothing but the ashes of what might have been. Chapter 6. The Marathon of Redemption. Redemption isn't a sprint. It's a marathon through broken glass while the world watches you bleed. Jamie didn't go home that night. Instead, he walked through the city streets until his feet hurt and blisters formed on his heels from the dress shoes he'd rented. He walked until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, colors that reminded him of Tammy's gown, of her strength, of everything he'd destroyed. When dawn broke over the skyline, he found himself standing outside the Mercy Women's Shelter, a place he'd seen mentioned in articles about Tammy's charitable donations, her efforts to help women rebuild their lives after escaping situations that had nearly destroyed them. The door was unlocked. Inside, a woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders looked up from a desk covered in paperwork, grant applications, intake forms, the administrative burden of saving lives. She had the look of someone who'd seen too much suffering and refused to look away from it. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious but not unkind. "I want to volunteer," Jamie said, his voice hoarse from a night of walking and crying, from screaming into the void of his own guilt. She studied him for a long moment, taking in his rumpled tuxedo and red-rimmed eyes, the obvious signs of someone who'd hit rock bottom and was searching for a way back up. "We don't usually take walk-ins. There's a process, background checks, training." "I know. But I need to do something. I need to be useful, please. The desperation in his voice was raw, undisguised. I need to be more than what I've been. Something in his voice must have convinced her, or perhaps she simply recognized the look of someone genuinely desperate to change. She handed him a clipboard with forms attached, papers that would document his intention to become better. Fill these out. If you're serious, be here tomorrow morning at 6. We serve breakfast at 7, and we need help setting up. But I'm warning you now, this isn't about feeling good about yourself. This is real work, hard work. And these women have been through hell. They don't need your pity or your guilt. They need your respect and your consistency. I'll be here. Her eyes narrowed slightly, recognition dawning. You're that man from the gala, the one who wronged Tammy Owens. I saw the videos online. Everyone did. Jamie flinched but didn't deny it, didn't make excuses. Yes, why are you really here? To assuage your guilt? To prove something to her? Because if that's why you're here, save us both the time. We don't need volunteers who are using us for redemption theater. To become the man I should have been, Jamie said, meeting her eyes steadily. To earn something I don't deserve. To prove that change is possible, even when you've done unforgivable things. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't expect anyone to believe me. But I'm here anyway, and I'll keep showing up until either you believe me or I prove to myself that I can be someone different. The woman was silent for a moment, measuring him, weighing his words against decades of broken promises from people who meant well but disappeared when the work got hard. I'm Fauna Pruitt. I run this shelter, and I've heard every excuse, every promise, every plea for redemption that exists. Men who want to volunteer for a week to feel better about themselves. Men who think showing up twice makes them heroes. Talk is cheap, Mr. Green, cheaper than the air you're breathing. I'll be watching what you do, not what you say. Then watch, Jamie said simply. Watch and judge me by my actions. He showed up the next morning at 6. And the morning after that. And every morning for weeks that stretched into months, through rain and heat and exhaustion that made his bones ache. He scrubbed floors until his knees ached and his hands cracked from cleaning chemicals. He served meals to women who'd been through hell and survived it, women whose eyes held stories he couldn't imagine. He listened to their stories without judgment or platitudes, without offering unwanted advice or false comfort, hearing echoes of what he'd put Tammy through in their pain, in their descriptions of betrayal and abandonment. Each story was a mirror held up to his own cruelty, and he forced himself to look, to really see what he'd been capable of. One woman, Kendra Stiles, reminded him achingly of Tammy. She had the same fierce determination in her eyes, the same refusal to let her circumstances define her, the same steel core wrapped in flesh and blood. She'd left an abusive marriage with nothing but her daughter and her determination to survive, walking out with the clothes on her back and a resolve that nothing would ever make her go back. "Why do you volunteer here?" she asked him one morning while they were washing dishes side by side, her hands moving efficiently through the soapy water while Jamie scrubbed pots with the kind of vigor that came from trying to scour away guilt. "Because I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Because I was complicit in cruelty, in creating the kind of pain that lands women in places like this. Because I need to learn how to be better than I was." That's honest, at least. Most volunteers give us some speech about giving back to the community or feeling called to serve. She glanced at him sideways. "Honesty is all I have left." Kendra studied him, soap suds clinging to her hands. "You know what the hardest part is? After you escape, after you rebuild, after you think you're finally safe, it's learning to trust again. Learning that not everyone will hurt you. Some of us never learn that lesson. We build walls so high that nobody can ever climb them. And we tell ourselves it's strength when really it's just fear." Jamie thought about Tammy, surrounded by success but alone, encased in armor that nothing could penetrate. "I know." On weekends, Jamie started mentoring at a youth center in the same neighborhood, working with teenagers who'd aged out of foster care or were on the verge of it. One of the teenagers, Flynn Guerrero, had grown up in the system and was aging out with nowhere to go and no support system. Facing adulthood with nothing but uncertainty and a deep mistrust of anyone who claimed they wanted to help, Jamie helped him apply for jobs, taught him to interview with confidence instead of defensiveness, shared the painful lessons he'd learned about humility and hard work and starting over when everything had collapsed. "Why do you care?" Flynn asked suspiciously one afternoon, his arms crossed defensively. "What do you get out of this? Nobody does something for nothing." "Nothing," Jamie admitted. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe doing something for nothing is the only way to prove you've changed. That's some philosophical bullshit." "Maybe, but it's true." He attended therapy sessions with Dr. Leona Marchetti, a psychologist who specialized in family systems and toxic relationships, in unpacking the damage done by parents who loved control more than their children. She made him examine every assumption he'd ever held about love. Control and power made him look at patterns he'd inherited without knowing it, behaviors he'd absorbed like poison through his skin. "Your mother didn't teach you how to be a partner," she said during one session, her voice calm but unwavering. "She taught you that love was about possession and control, that people were tools to be used for maintaining image and status, that vulnerability was weakness and compassion was foolishness. Those lessons are written into your bones, Mr. Green. They're part of your operating system. I know that now. Knowing isn't enough. You have to unlearn those patterns, rebuild yourself from scratch, rewrite the code you were programmed with. It's painful work, Jamie. Most people give up halfway through because facing yourself honestly is harder than anything else you'll ever do. Harder than poverty, harder than public humiliation, harder than losing everything. Because you can't lie to yourself anymore. You can't pretend you're someone you're not. I won't give up. We'll see. That's what everyone says at the beginning. But redemption is a marathon, not a sprint. And most people run out of strength before they reach the finish line. He wrote letters to Tammy, not begging for forgiveness or making excuses or asking for another chance. Just documenting his journey, his stumbling attempts to become someone different. Telling her about Kendra and Flynn and Dr. Marchetti, about the women at the shelter who were rebuilding their lives with courage that humbled him daily, about the slow, painful process of becoming someone he could respect when he looked in the mirror, someone who didn't immediately look away in shame. He never expected responses, never checked his mailbox hoping for a reply. He sent the letters anyway, addressed to her main office, hoping she'd at least read them, hoping she'd see that his transformation wasn't a performance, but a genuine metamorphosis. Months passed. The seasons changed. Summer heat gave way to autumn chill, then winter cold. Jamie sold the last piece of his mother's jewelry, a diamond brooch she'd treasured more than she'd ever treasured him, and donated the money to Tammy's scholarship fund for young entrepreneurs trying to escape poverty. He didn't tell Tammy directly, didn't make a show of it, didn't expect recognition, but word got back to her anyway, the way information always travels through connected communities. At the shelter one morning, Jamie found Opal Crenshaw serving breakfast, the woman who'd first given Tammy a chance when nobody else would. She looked at him with sharp, assessing eyes that had seen decades of human nature in all its complexity. "So you're the ex-husband," she said without preamble. No softening of the judgment in her voice. "Yes, Tammy could have destroyed you completely. She has the power, the resources, the motivation, the connections. But she didn't, you know why? No, because she's not like your mother. She doesn't find joy in crushing people, in watching them suffer. She finds joy in building them up, in creating opportunities, in helping people become their best selves. She spent years creating pathways for people who started with nothing." Opal handed him a dish towel, the gesture somehow feeling like a test. "The question is, can you become someone worth building? Or are you forever defined by the worst thing you've ever done?" Jamie thought about that question while he dried dishes, while he mopped floors, while he listened to survival stories that broke his heart and put it back together in a slightly different shape. Could he become someone worth building? Or was he forever the man who'd destroyed his wife on their wedding night, trapped in amber, preserved in his worst moment? "I don't know," he admitted to Opal later, the honesty painful but necessary. "But I'm trying. Every single day I'm trying to become someone different." "That's a start," Opal said. "Not a finish, but a start." One evening, Jamie's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His heart jumped, thinking it might be Tammy, hoping against hope that she'd finally decided to respond. Instead, it was a photo from his mother's latest phone number. Despite him blocking her repeatedly, despite the restraining order, despite everything, the photo showed Tammy leaving her office building, captured from across the street. The message below read, "She ruined us. She deserves to be ruined in return. I know people who could make problems for her empire. Just say the word, and I'll destroy her the way she destroyed us." Jamie stared at the message for a long time, his hands shaking with rage and something close to fear. Here was his mother, still poisonous, still manipulative, still trying to pull him into her web of cruelty, still unable to accept that she'd destroyed herself. He could ignore it. He could block this number like he'd blocked the others, but ignoring wasn't enough anymore. Not if his mother was threatening Tammy, not if her poison was spreading toward the one person he was trying to protect. Jamie screenshot the message, blocked the number again, and contacted his lawyer. "I need to document everything. Every threat, every message, every time she's tried to contact me since I cut her off. And I need to warn someone." "Who?" "Tammy Owens. My mother is threatening her. She needs to know that the war isn't over." It took him 3 days to work up the courage, 3 days of carrying his phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Finally, late one evening, when exhaustion had lowered his defenses, he sent an email to Tammy's office account. Not the personal letters he'd been writing, but a formal warning with all the screenshots attached, evidence of his mother's continuing malice. "Your mother is threatening me," Tammy called him an hour later, her voice cold and controlled, the warmth he remembered completely absent. "Is this another manipulation? Another game? Some elaborate scheme you've cooked up together?" "No, I swear. I've been trying to cut her out of my life completely, but she keeps finding ways to contact me. New phones, new accounts, new angles. These threats against you are the last straw. I'm filing additional documentation, and I'm telling you everything. You need to know what she's planning, what she's capable of." Silence stretched between them, heavy with years of betrayal and months of attempted redemption. "Why would you warn me?" Tammy finally asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Because you deserve to be protected. Because my mother is poison, and I'm done protecting her, done making excuses for her. Because it's the right thing to do, even if you never forgive me, even if this changes nothing between us." "I see." More silence. "Then meet me at the original Phoenix Artisan storefront, tomorrow at dusk." "Tammy, be there or don't. Your choice." She hung up before he could respond. Jamie stared at his phone, heart racing like he'd run a marathon. She'd agreed to see him. After months of letters and silence, after his public humiliation at the gala, after everything, she was giving him a chance to speak to her face to face. To look into those eyes he'd once taken for granted. He'd spent months becoming someone better, doing the hard work of transformation. Now he'd have to prove it was real, that he'd truly changed, that redemption was more than just a word people used to feel better about their failures. Chapter 7. The Impossible Conversation. Some conversations don't heal wounds. They simply expose how deep they really go. Jamie arrived at the storefront when the sun was still high, unable to wait, too nervous to stay away. The building looked exactly as it had in those early magazine articles about Tammy's rise. Small, unassuming, the windows now displaying work from local artists who'd followed in her footsteps. He paced the sidewalk, rehearsing words that sounded hollow, even in his own mind. How did you apologize for destroying someone's faith in love? How did you make amends for a betrayal so complete it had redefined who they were? As dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Tammy appeared. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No designer gown, no armor of wealth and success. Just Tammy, stripped of all the trappings she'd built around herself. Somehow, that made everything harder. "You came," Jamie said, his voice rough from hours of silence. "You've been showing up for months," Tammy replied, stopping a careful distance away. "Not close enough to touch, not close enough for intimacy. The least I could do was show up once." They stood in awkward silence, the air between them heavy with everything unsaid. "Fauna Pruitt called me," Tammy finally said. "She told me you've been volunteering 40 hours a week on top of your job. Opal says you mentor kids who have nowhere else to turn. Dr. Marchetti says your progress in therapy has been remarkable. I'm trying to be better." "Why?" The question came sharp and sudden. "Why now? Why after everything you did? Why should I believe this isn't just another act? Because I don't want anything from you." The words burst out of Jamie before he could stop them. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to take me back. I don't expect anything, except maybe to look at myself in the mirror and not hate what I see." "You should hate what you see. What you did was unforgivable. I know. Do you?" Tammy's voice rose, all the control she'd maintained cracking around the edges. "Do you really know what you did to me? You didn't just break my heart, Jamie. You broke my ability to trust. You broke my faith in people. You broke the part of me that believed in love and promises and forever." "I know," Jamie whispered. "How could you?" The question came out raw and wounded. "On our wedding night, in your mother's room, with her watching like it was some kind of sick entertainment. How could you do that to another human being?" "I don't have an answer that makes it okay. I was weak. I was controlled. I was more afraid of disappointing my mother than of destroying you." He met her eyes, not hiding from the pain he saw there. "I was a coward who let the most important person in my life become collateral damage in a war I didn't even know I was supposed to be fighting." Tammy laughed, but it was bitter and sharp. "A war? Is that what you're calling it? Your mother controlled you, so I had to suffer." "No, that's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what I did. I'm just trying to explain how someone could be that cruel. I didn't see you as a person, Tammy. I saw you as an obligation, a duty, something my mother arranged, and I went along with because I'd never learned how to say no to her." "Then why did you marry me at all?" "Because some part of me wanted to be different, wanted to be better, wanted to believe I could escape her influence." He shook his head. "But I wasn't strong enough. Not then. And you think you're strong enough now?" "I don't know. But I'm trying to be." Tammy pulled out her phone and showed him a message. Jamie read it, his face going pale. "I hear my foolish son is trying to win you back." How pathetic. "But then again, you always were good at manipulating weak men. Did you enjoy destroying our family? Enjoy your little empire built on lies? You'll never be anything but the gold-digging trash who got lucky." "My mother sent this?" Jamie's voice was hollow. "This morning, along with 6 others over the past month." Tammy scrolled through more messages, each one more vicious than the last. "She's been calling my partners, spreading rumors that I'm trying to sabotage you as revenge. She contacted investors, claiming I'm emotionally unstable and vindictive. She's trying to destroy everything I've built." "Jesus Christ!" Jamie looked sick. "Tammy, I swear I didn't know. I blocked her numbers. I filed a restraining order. I thought that would be enough. It's not enough." Tammy's control finally broke. "Don't you understand? Your mother is poison, and poison doesn't stop just because you ask nicely. She's going to keep coming after me, keep trying to tear down everything I've built, because in her twisted mind, I'm the one who destroyed her precious family. I'll stop her." "How?" "She's your mother, Jamie. Can you really stand against her? Can you really choose me over her?" The question hung between them like a blade. "I already have," Jamie said quietly. "The moment I warned you about her threats, I chose you. The moment I started trying to become better, I chose to be someone she didn't raise. I've spent my whole life being her puppet. I'm done with that. I'm done with her. Tammy studied him, searching for cracks, for weakness, for any sign of the man who'd crumbled under his mother's will. "Here's what's going to happen," she said finally, her voice steady again. "You're going to handle your mother permanently, not just a restraining order, not just blocking numbers. You're going to make it clear that if she comes near me, my work, or anyone I care about, there will be consequences. Legal consequences, public consequences, whatever it takes. I will. And if you fail..." Tammy stepped closer, close enough that Jamie could smell the familiar scent of her shampoo, something simple and clean that brought back memories of before everything broke. "If she wins, if you back down, if I see even a hint of the old weakness, we never speak again. No more letters, no more chances, no more anything. Because I won't give you a third chance to destroy me. I won't fail. You say that now. But when she's crying, when she's playing the victim, when she's reminding you that she's your mother and family is everything, will you still be strong enough?" "Yes, prove it. How?" Tammy's expression hardened. "That's your problem to solve. Figure it out yourself. That's what I had to do when you threw me away. I had to figure out how to survive, how to rebuild, how to become someone new. Now it's your turn. Figure out how to become a man worth trusting. Figure out how to stand up to the woman who created the monster you used to be. And if you can't," she shrugged, "then at least we'll both know the truth. And if I can, then maybe I'll believe you're different. Maybe I'll believe change is possible. Maybe I'll stop seeing you as the man who destroyed me and start seeing you as someone new. That's all I want." "No," Tammy corrected. "What you want is forgiveness. What you want is redemption. What you want is for me to tell you that it's all okay now, that your months of volunteering and therapy have erased what you did." She shook her head. "But I can't give you that. Only you can give that to yourself. And you can only do it by becoming someone who doesn't need it anymore." She turned to leave. Then panic seized Jamie's throat. "Wait, please, just tell me one thing." Tammy paused but didn't turn around. "Do you still hate me?" "No," she said softly. "Hate requires caring. I stopped caring a long time ago. What I feel now is worse than hate, Jamie. It's indifference. And the only thing that could change that is if you actually became someone worth caring about again." She walked away, leaving Jamie alone on the street as darkness fell. He watched her disappear around the corner, then pulled out his phone. His mother had called 17 times today, sent a dozen messages, each one demanding attention, demanding obedience, demanding he choose her over everyone and everything else. Jamie blocked the number. Then he called his lawyer. "I need to file a restraining order," he said. "Against Jolene Green, yes, my mother. And I need to document everything. Every threat she's made against Tammy Owens. Every message, every call, every time she's tried to manipulate me back under her control. Whatever it takes to keep her away from someone I care about." As he walked home through the cold evening, Jamie felt something shift inside him. For months, he'd been becoming a better person. But it had all been theoretical, abstract, safe. Now came the real test. Standing up to the woman who'd shaped every moment of his life. Choosing the path forward over the path back. Becoming someone new by destroying every last piece of who he used to be. The war with his mother wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, Jamie intended to win. Chapter 8. The Mother's War. Jolene Green didn't build an empire by accepting defeat, and she wouldn't let her son choose some nobody over his own blood. The restraining order arrived at Jolene's apartment on a grey morning when rain hammered against the windows. She read it once, twice, 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. Her own son, the boy she'd raised and shaped and controlled, had filed legal papers against her. She called him immediately. Blocked. She tried texting. Blocked. She sent an email. It bounced back with an automated message that her address had been filtered. He'd actually done it. He'd actually chosen that woman over his own mother. Jolene poured herself a glass of wine, even though it wasn't yet noon. Her hands shook with rage as she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Years of manipulating people, of collecting favors and secrets, of building leverage had left her with a network that most people couldn't imagine. She might have lost her money and her mansion and her social standing, but she still had power, and she knew exactly how to use it. First, she called Randolph Pierce, a man who'd built his fortune through methods that didn't bear close scrutiny. He owed her for keeping certain secrets buried during the Kai Sutherland investigation. "Jolene," he answered warily, "I heard about the restraining order. I need information about Tammy Owens and her empire. Anything that could be used against her. I know you have people who specialize in finding weaknesses. I don't think that's a good idea. The Owens woman is well connected now, and I can't afford another scandal. You can't afford for me to talk about how you made your first million either. Your choice, Randolph." Silence. Then reluctantly, "I'll see what I can find." Next was Sloane Thayer, an editor at a tabloid magazine who'd climbed her way up by destroying reputations. They'd been friends once, back when Jolene had power to offer. "I need you to run stories," Jolene said without preamble. "About Tammy Owens, about labor violations, financial irregularities, anything that makes her look questionable. Do you have proof of any violations?" Does it matter? You've never needed proof before. Things are different now, Jolene. You're not in a position to protect me anymore. And Owens has lawyers who would bury me for publishing lies. Are you refusing me? I'm being smart. Something you should try." Sloane hung up before Jolene could respond. Fury burned through Jolene's chest. How dare they? How dare everyone turn their backs on her after everything she'd done for them, all the favors she'd granted, all the secrets she'd kept. She tried 6 more contacts. Half didn't answer. The others made excuses and got off the phone as quickly as possible. Nobody wanted to be associated with the Green family anymore. Nobody wanted to help her exact revenge. Fine, if they wouldn't help directly, she'd work around them. Jolene contacted Vance Hartley, a lawyer whose ethics were flexible and whose loyalty could be bought. "I need you to file complaints, anonymous ones, about Tammy Owens' companies. Labor violations, safety concerns, financial irregularities. Anything that will trigger investigations and tie her up in legal problems. That could backfire on you. I have a restraining order against me. I can't get any lower, but I can take her down with me. It'll cost you. I'll pay. Whatever it takes." Over the following weeks, anonymous complaints began appearing. Regulatory agencies received tips about violations that didn't exist. Investors received mysterious packages containing doctored documents suggesting financial fraud. Local news outlets got anonymous calls about labor problems at Tammy's facilities. Most of it was easily disproven. But it took time and energy and money to fight. Time and energy and money that could have been spent growing the empire Tammy had built. At her office, Tammy sat across from Romy, reviewing yet another baseless complaint that had been filed against one of their facilities. "This is the 5th one this month," Romy said. "Someone is orchestrating this. I know who. Jolene Green." "Who else?" Tammy set down the papers and rubbed her temples. "He's using intermediaries, staying just far enough away that the restraining order doesn't apply. She's not contacting Jamie or me directly. She's just destroying everything I've built piece by piece. What are we going to do?" "We'll fight. What else can we do?" But fighting was exhausting. 3 investors pulled out of a major expansion deal, spooked by the rumors and complaints even after they were proven false. The damage had been done. Doubt had been planted. Tammy worked 18-hour days, putting out fires, reassuring partners, documenting everything in case it became a legal matter. She barely slept, barely ate. All her energy went into protecting what she'd built from a woman who couldn't stand to see her succeed. Meanwhile, Jamie remained oblivious. He'd blocked his mother so completely that he had no idea she'd launched a covert war against the woman he was trying to prove himself to. He continued volunteering at the shelter, mentoring Flynn, attending therapy. He was becoming better, stronger, more capable of standing on his own. But he didn't know that while he was building himself up, his mother was tearing Tammy down. At the shelter one morning, Shiloh pulled Jamie aside. "Has anyone been asking about you? Following you? Watching the shelter?" "No, why?" "I've seen someone in a car across the street the past 3 days, just sitting there watching. It might be nothing, but after everything that happened with your family, I thought you should know." Jamie's blood ran cold. "What kind of car?" "Issue, black sedan. Tinted windows. Professional looking. A private investigator." Jamie felt sick. "My mother must have hired someone to watch me. Why would she do that?" "And me, because she's gathering information. Building a case. Planning something." He pulled out his phone. "I need to warn Tammy." He called her office. Romy answered with exhaustion clear in her voice. "I need to speak with Tammy. It's urgent. She's in a meeting with lawyers. We've been dealing with a wave of false complaints, and I can't—" "False complaints?" Jamie's stomach dropped. "What kind of complaints?" "Anonymous tips about labor violations, safety issues, financial problems. All of them false, but they still require time and resources to fight. We're pretty sure someone is orchestrating it, but we can't prove who." Jamie closed his eyes. "It's my mother. It has to be. She's using intermediaries to stay within the bounds of the restraining order while still attacking Tammy indirectly." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but I will. Let me talk to Tammy, please." 10 minutes later, Tammy called back. Her voice was sharp with exhaustion and barely controlled anger. "Your mother is trying to destroy everything I've built." "I know. I just found out." "Tammy, I'm so sorry. I thought blocking her would be enough. I thought the restraining order would stop her. I was wrong. Yes, you were wrong. And while you've been volunteering and going to therapy and becoming a better person, I've been fighting a war I didn't even know had started. I'll stop her. I'll find proof. You've been saying you'll stop her for months, Jamie, but she's still coming. She's still fighting. She's still trying to take everything from me. When does it actually stop?" When I make it stop. I'll talk to my lawyer. We'll find the connections between her and whoever is filing these complaints. We'll expose her. And how long will that take? How much more damage will she do while you're gathering evidence? I don't know, but I won't let her win. Not this time. Tammy was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft and sad. "You know what the worst part is? I actually started to believe you might have changed. I read your letters. I heard about your work at the shelter. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd become someone different. But your mother is still controlling your life, Jamie. She's just doing it indirectly now. That's not true, isn't it? If you were really free of her, this wouldn't be happening. She wouldn't still have the power to hurt the people you claim to care about." The words hit like physical blows. Because she was right. Despite everything he'd done, despite all the work and therapy and change, his mother still had power over him. Not direct control anymore, but the ability to hurt people through him, to poison everything he touched. "I'll fix this," Jamie said. "Whatever it takes." "You keep saying that. But words don't mean anything anymore, Jamie. Only actions do. And right now, your mother's actions are destroying me while your actions are accomplishing nothing." She hung up without saying goodbye. Jamie stood in the middle of the shelter, phone still pressed to his ear, feeling the weight of failure crushing down on him. He'd spent months trying to become better, trying to prove he'd changed. But none of it mattered if he couldn't protect Tammy from the poison that had raised him. It was time to stop trying to escape his mother. It was time to face her directly and end this war once and for all, even if it meant destroying what was left of his family completely. Chapter 9. The Choice of Fire. Sometimes the hardest battle isn't against your enemy. It's deciding whether to become like them. Jamie sat in his lawyer's office, surrounded by evidence that made him sick to his stomach. Recordings of his mother's phone calls to various contacts. Financial records showing payments to Vance Hartley for filing false complaints. documentation of the private investigator she'd hired to surveil Jamie and gather information about Tammy's routines. "This is more than enough," the lawyer said. "We can file charges, harassment, conspiracy, possibly fraud, depending on how far we want to push it. Your mother could face serious legal consequences." "Do it," Jamie said. "Are you sure? Once we file, there's no going back. The evidence will be public. The charges will be public. Your family's reputation, what's left of it, will be completely destroyed." "My family destroyed itself a long time ago. I'm just making sure it can't hurt anyone else." The lawyer nodded and began preparing the paperwork, but as Jamie walked out of the office, his phone rang. Tammy. "We need to meet," she said without preamble. "Now, at my office." 20 minutes later, Jamie stood in Tammy's office overlooking the city. She was behind her desk, surrounded by papers, and looking more exhausted than he'd ever seen her. "I found these," she said, sliding an envelope across the desk. Inside were surveillance photos of Jamie at the shelter, at the youth center, at his therapy appointments, photos of Tammy leaving her office, photos of Opal, Dante, Shiloh, everyone who'd helped either of them rebuild their lives. "Your mother didn't just hire someone to watch you," Tammy said. "She's been documenting everyone in my life, everyone I care about, and I just got a message from an anonymous email address." She showed Jamie her phone. The message was simple and devastating. "I have information on Opal Crenshaw's immigration status, on Dante Livingston's sealed juvenile record, on Shiloh Reeves' custody situation, on every person who helped you build your little empire. Release those files your father left behind, and I'll release mine. Let sleeping dogs lie." Jamie felt the world tilt beneath him. She's threatening everyone you love. Not just threatening, promising. Your mother has spent years building leverage on people, collecting secrets, waiting for the moment she'd need them, and now she's ready to use them. Tammy's voice was hollow. "If I don't back down, she'll destroy the people who saved my life. We can fight this. The evidence my lawyer has will take months to go through the legal system. Your mother can release her information tomorrow. She can ruin lives before we ever see the inside of a courtroom." Jamie sank into a chair, the weight of his mother's evil crushing down on him. "This is my fault, all of it. She's doing this because of me." "Yes," Tammy agreed, "but knowing that doesn't help me decide what to do now." They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside the window, the city sparkled with lights, millions of people living their lives, unaware of the war being waged in this office. "What's in the files?" Tammy finally asked. "The ones your father left behind. You said they contained proof of everything your mother did. How bad is it?" "Bad. Really bad. Decades of blackmail, fraud, destroyed lives. If those files became public, dozens of powerful people would go down with her. Politicians, executives, judges, people who helped her or looked the other way. So we have mutually assured destruction. She destroys the people I love. I destroy her and everyone connected to her." "Basically." Tammy stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city she'd conquered through sheer force of will. "I've spent years building all this, and the one thing I promised myself was that I'd never become like your mother. Never use power to hurt people. Never destroy lives just because I could. You're nothing like her." "Really? Because right? Now I'm seriously considering releasing files that would ruin dozens of people just to protect myself and the people I care about. How is that different from what she does? Intent. She hurts people for pleasure and control. You'd be doing it for protection. Is that enough? Is good intent enough to justify becoming a monster?" Jamie had no answer, because he'd been asking himself the same question for months. Could he become someone different if he was still connected to the evil that created him? Could Tammy stay good if she had to fight evil with evil? There might be another way, Jamie said slowly. What if we meet with her, face to face? Record the conversation. Get her to admit what she's doing. Add it to the evidence we already have. Your mother isn't stupid. She won't confess on tape. She will if she thinks she's won, if she thinks we're surrendering. My mother's biggest weakness is her ego. She can't resist gloating when she thinks she's destroyed someone. Tammy considered this. It's risky. If we fail, she'll know we're coming for her. She'll release everything immediately. I know, but it's better than the alternatives. Better than letting her win or becoming like her to stop her. And if she does admit everything, if we get the recording, what then? Then we go to the authorities with everything. The recording, the documents, all of it. We make sure she can never hurt anyone again. Tammy turned from the window to look at Jamie. Really look at him, searching for any sign of the man who destroyed her on their wedding night. This could backfire spectacularly. She could refuse to meet, or she could bring her own insurance that we don't know about. I know. You're asking me to gamble everything on your ability to manipulate your mother into confessing her crimes. Yes. Why should I trust you? Why should I believe you can actually do this? Jamie met her eyes steadily. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of her. Because I've spent months learning how to be strong. Because I'd rather fail trying to do the right thing than succeed by becoming like her. And because you deserve better than to have your choices taken away by someone else's evil. Tammy was quiet for a long time. Jamie watched emotions play across her face. Fear, anger, exhaustion, and something else. Something that might have been hope. If we do this, she finally said, we do it together. No more you trying to fix things alone while I deal with the consequences. We're partners in this. Equal partners. Agreed. And if it fails, if she wins, if everything comes crashing down, then at least we fought back. At least we didn't let her win without a fight. Tammy pulled out her phone. I'll send her a message, request a meeting, neutral location, tell her we're ready to discuss terms. She'll assume we're surrendering. Good. Let her think that. Let her come confident and ready to gloat. Tammy's expression hardened. And then we'll show her exactly what happens when you underestimate the people you tried to destroy. She typed out the message and hit send. Jamie watched her, seeing the warrior she'd become, the phoenix risen from the ashes of his betrayal. Whatever happened next, at least they were facing it together. His phone buzzed almost immediately, his mother responding from yet another number he hadn't blocked yet. I'll meet you. Tomorrow, Harbour Warehouse District, Pier 17. Come alone or I release everything. Jamie showed the message to Tammy. She wants us separated, wants to maintain control. Then we do this her way, but we come prepared. Tammy pulled recording devices from her desk drawer. I've been expecting something like this. I've had these ready for weeks. You knew she'd force a confrontation? I know predators. They always circle back for one more kill. She handed him one of the devices. Tomorrow, we end this, one way or another. Jamie took the device, feeling its weight in his palm. Tomorrow, he would face the woman who'd shaped his entire life. The woman who'd taught him that love was control and people were tools. The woman who'd made him into a monster. Tomorrow he would prove he was no longer her son. He was someone new, someone better, someone capable of fighting for the people he cared about instead of sacrificing them to maintain power. But first, he had to survive the night, because Jolene Green was expecting surrender, and she was about to get war instead. And war, as Jamie was learning, required sacrifice. Chapter 10. The Reckoning Begins. The documents in the box didn't just expose Jolene Green's crimes. They exposed everyone who'd helped her. Jamie spent the night reading through his father's files one more time, and with each page, the scope of his mother's corruption became clearer. She hadn't worked alone. Dozens of people had enabled her over the years, some knowingly, trading their integrity for favors and connections, others unwittingly, following orders from someone they trusted without questioning the cost. His father had documented everything: bank transfers, recorded conversations, emails, detailing schemes that had destroyed families and ended careers. The man had been building a case against his own wife, perhaps planning to use it as insurance, perhaps planning to turn her in before he died. He'd never gotten the chance. A heart attack had taken him suddenly, and the evidence had sat in a safe deposit box, waiting. "This is bigger than we thought," Jamie said, when Tammy arrived at his apartment before dawn. They'd agreed to meet before heading to the warehouse to go over the plan one final time. Tammy sat down and began reading through the documents Jamie had laid out. Her face grew paler with each page. These people are still in power, still making decisions that affect thousands of lives. And they all helped your mother destroy anyone who threatened them. If we release this, we take down an entire network, and if we don't, your mother keeps using them to hurt people. Tammy set down the papers. There's no good choice here, is there? Either we become destroyers ourselves, or we let her keep destroying others. There's a third option. We give this to the authorities. Let them decide who gets prosecuted and who gets immunity for cooperation. We don't have to be judge and jury. We just have to expose the truth. Your mother won't let us get that far. She knows what these files contain. She'll do anything to keep them buried. That's why we're recording her today. That's why we need her confession. If we can prove she's actively threatening people, authorities will have to act. They can't ignore corruption when it's happening in real time. Tammy checked her watch. We need to leave soon. The meeting is in an hour. Are you sure you want to do this? We could still back down. Let her think she's won. Disappear and start over somewhere else. Is that what you want? No, but I want you safe, more than I want revenge. Tammy smiled, but it was sad and tired. I've spent years being safe, Jamie, building walls around myself, never letting anyone close enough to hurt me again. And you know what? I'm tired of being safe. I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. If we're going to do this, we do it now, while I still have the courage. They drove to the warehouse district in silence. The area was deserted at this early hour. Nothing but old buildings and empty loading docks, and the smell of salt water from the harbor. Pier 17 was at the far end, isolated and forgotten, perfect for a confrontation that needed to stay private. Jolene was already there when they arrived. She stood at the center of the warehouse floor, dressed immaculately despite the surroundings. Even in defeat, even living in a modest apartment and working her angles from the shadows, she carried herself like royalty. "Jamie," she said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "I'm disappointed. I specifically said to come alone." "Things change," Jamie replied, his voice steady. The recording device in his pocket was already running. "Tammy has a right to be here. This involves her as much as it involves me." Jolene's eyes tracked to Tammy, cold and assessing. "The little gold digger. I wondered when you'd show your face." "Mrs. Green," Tammy said calmly. "Let's skip the insults and get to the point. You threatened the people I care about. You've spent months trying to destroy everything I've built. What do you want?" "What do I want?" Jolene laughed. "I want you to disappear. I want you to take your empire and vanish from this city, from this state, from anywhere my family's name might ever be mentioned. I want you gone. In exchange for what? In exchange for the people you care about staying safe. Opal keeps her immigration status unquestioned. Dante's past stays sealed. Shiloh keeps custody of her daughter. Everyone you've brought into your little charity project stays protected." Jolene smiled. "All you have to do is walk away from everything you've built. And if I refuse, then I release what I have." "And I have a lot, Tammy. Information that would destroy lives, end careers, separate families. I've spent decades collecting leverage. I know how to hurt people where they're most vulnerable. You're admitting to blackmail, Jamie said carefully, to threatening innocent people. I'm negotiating, Jolene corrected. There's a difference. And yes, before you ask, I'm also the one who filed all those complaints against Tammy's companies. I'm the one who spread rumors to her investors. I'm the one who hired investigators to document her every move. She took a step closer to them. I told you when you left, Jamie. I told you that choosing her over your family would have consequences. Did you really think I'd let you humiliate me without fighting back? I think you'd destroy the world before admitting you were wrong, Jamie said. Wrong? About what? About understanding that people are either useful or they're obstacles. About knowing that power is the only thing that matters in this world. Jolene's voice rose with passion. I raised you to be strong, Jamie. I raised you to be someone who mattered. And you threw it all away for this woman who offers you nothing but weakness and sentiment. She offers me something you never did, Jamie said quietly. The chance to be better than I was. Better. Jolene spat the word like poison. You're managing a retail store and volunteering at soup kitchens. You went from heir to an empire to nothing but another failure, drowning in delusions of redemption. How's that better? Because I can look at myself in the mirror now. Because I'm not defined by the evil I inherited. Because I'm building something real instead of maintaining something rotten. Jolene's face twisted with contempt. You sound like a greeting. Bucard, pathetic. You were so much more when you were mine. I was never yours, Jamie said. I was just too afraid to realize it. And now, are you still afraid? Terrified. But I'm doing it anyway. Jolene turned her attention back to Tammy. You think you've won something here? You think turning my son against me makes you special? You're just another woman who thought she could change a man. And when he fails you, when he proves that people don't really change, you'll understand why I did what I did. Why I've always done what needed to be done. Maybe, Tammy said. Or maybe you're just a bitter woman who mistakes cruelty for strength and control for love. Love? Jolene laughed. Love is a fairy tale for people too stupid to understand how the world really works. My son loved you once. Look where that got him. He never loved me, Tammy corrected. Love requires seeing someone as a person, not a possession. And you never taught him the difference. For a moment, Jolene's mask slipped. Jamie saw something raw and wounded in his mother's eyes, something almost human. Then it was gone, buried under layers of anger and entitlement. Enough philosophy, Jolene said. Do we have a deal? You disappear, I leave your people alone. Or you refuse, and I destroy everything you've spent years building. Choose. Jamie and Tammy exchanged a glance. The recording had everything they needed. Jolene admitting to the complaints, to the threats, to the blackmail. Enough to prove she'd violated the restraining order. Enough to build a case that authorities couldn't ignore. No deal, Tammy said. We're not running anymore. Jolene's expression hardened. You'll regret this. Maybe. But at least we'll regret standing up to you instead of cowering from you. Then I'll release everything. Today. By this afternoon, everyone you care about will be drowning in problems they can't fix. You'll watch your empire crumble and know it was your pride that destroyed it. Or, Jamie said, you'll find yourself arrested for harassment, blackmail, and conspiracy. We've been recording this entire conversation, Mother. Every threat, every admission, all of it. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Jolene's face. You wouldn't dare. I already did. And we have more. Dad's files, the evidence he collected about everything you've done. Everyone you've hurt, everyone who helped you. It's all documented, and it's all ready to be turned over to the authorities. Your father was a fool who thought he could control me, and you're a fool if you think those files scare me. But Jolene's voice wavered. Half the people in those files are powerful enough to make this disappear. You'll never get a prosecution. Maybe not all of them, Tammy agreed, but some. And even if they all escape justice, the truth will be public. Everyone will know what you are, what you've always been. You think I care about public opinion? I've already lost everything. You have nowhere left to hurt me. You're right, Jamie said. We can't hurt you anymore. You've already hurt yourself more than we ever could. But we can stop you from hurting anyone else. And that's enough." Jolene stood in silence, calculating. Jamie could see her mind working, searching for an angle, a way to regain control. But for once, she'd miscalculated. She'd assumed they'd be too afraid to fight back. She'd forgotten that people who've survived hell aren't afraid of fire. "This isn't over," Jolene finally said. "You think you've won, but I still have resources you don't know about. I still have people who owe me favors. I can still—" Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went white. "What is it?" Jamie asked. "Nothing. None of your concern." But Tammy had seen something shift in Jolene's expression. Fear. Real, genuine fear. "What did that message say?" "Get out," Jolene said, her voice tight. "Both of you. This meeting is over. Not until you tell us what's happening." Jolene looked at them, and for the first time Jamie could remember, his mother looked small and afraid. "I made a deal to protect myself, to ensure I had leverage against you. But the person I made the deal with just informed me that they've been arrested. Federal charges, and they're cooperating with authorities. Naming names, including mine." "Who?" Tammy demanded. "Vance Hartley, the lawyer I hired to file the false complaints. Apparently, he was running similar schemes for multiple clients, and the FBI was already investigating him. My name is in his files. Everything I've done through him, all documented." Jamie felt something shift in the air. This wasn't just about their confrontation anymore. This was bigger. "When did you get that message?" he asked. "Just now." Jolene's hands were shaking. "They're coming. The authorities. They're going to arrest me. And when they do, they'll find out about everything. The blackmail, the threats, the network of people I've been using." "Good," Tammy said coldly. "You don't understand. If I go down, a lot of people go down with me. Powerful people, dangerous people, people who won't want their names associated with mine." Jolene looked at Jamie with something that might have been desperation. "You need to destroy those files. Your father's evidence. If that becomes public while I'm being investigated, they'll kill me to keep their secrets safe. You should have thought of that before you spent decades collecting leverage on dangerous people," Jamie said. "Please, I'm your mother. Whatever I've done, whatever mistakes I've made, I'm still your mother. You can't just stand by and let me die." Jamie looked at the woman who'd shaped his entire life. The woman who'd taught him that love was weakness and compassion was foolishness. The woman who'd made him into a monster and then acted surprised when the monster turned on its creator. He felt nothing. Not hatred, not pity, not even satisfaction at her fear. Just a vast emptiness where family obligation used to live. "You stopped being my mother the day you made me into someone I despised," Jamie said quietly. "We're done here. Good luck with the authorities." He turned to leave, Tammy beside him. "Wait!" Jolene's voice cracked with panic. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll leave the city. I'll never contact either of you again. Just destroy those files. Just give me a chance to disappear." They paused at the warehouse door. Jamie looked back one final time at the woman who'd controlled his life for so long. "No," he said simply. And then they walked out into the morning light, leaving Jolene Green alone with the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty. Behind them, they heard her screaming, raging, promising revenge, begging for mercy. The same desperate sounds she'd caused in countless others over decades of manipulation and control. "Do you think they'll really kill her?" Tammy asked as they reached the car. "I don't know. Maybe she'll cut a deal. Maybe she'll escape somehow. Honestly, I don't care anymore." "Is that terrible? That we don't care?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's just healthy boundaries." They drove in silence for a while, processing everything that had happened. The confrontation, the recording, Jolene's fear when her own schemes finally caught up with her. "What do we do with your father's files?" Tammy finally asked. "Turn them over to the FBI along with our recording. Let them sort through the corruption and decide who deserves prosecution. It's not our job to be vigilantes. We just needed to stop her from hurting anyone else. And the people in those files? The ones who helped her? They'll have to face their own reckonings. That's not our responsibility either. Tammy nodded, then pulled over suddenly. Jamie looked at her in concern. Are you okay? I don't know. Tammy gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. For years, I've imagined facing your mother. Imagined what I'd say, how I'd feel when she finally got what she deserved. And now that it's happening, I just feel empty. Like I used up all my rage years ago and there's nothing left. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Maybe it means I've moved on. Or maybe it means I'm just tired. She looked at Jamie. What happens now? Between us? After everything? I don't know that either. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to have all the answers right now. Do you still want to try? To see if there's something salvageable between us? Jamie thought about it carefully. About the man he used to be and the man he was becoming. About the woman who'd survived his worst cruelty and become stronger for it. About whether two people forged in fire could build something that wouldn't burn. Yes, he said finally. But slowly, carefully, with no expectations and no guarantees. Just two people trying to figure out if redemption is possible. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. They sat in silence for a moment longer. Then Tammy's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face changed. What? Jamie asked. It's Romy, she's frantic. Someone just posted bail for someone. $500,000. She doesn't know who yet, but the bail amount is huge. She thinks your mother might have arranged for someone dangerous to be released as insurance. Jamie felt ice flood his veins. She said she had resources we didn't know about. People who owed her favors. Who could she have posted bail for that would be worth $500,000? They looked at each other, the same terrible thought occurring to both of them simultaneously. Jolene Green hadn't just been collecting leverage on powerful people. She'd been collecting leverage on dangerous people. People who do anything to keep their secrets buried. And now, facing arrest and knowing her network was being exposed, she'd called in her final favor. She'd arranged for someone to be released. Someone who would do what needed to be done to protect everyone involved. Someone who would be coming for them, for the files, for anyone who knew too much. The reckoning had begun, but it wasn't over. It had only just started. And somewhere in the city, someone dangerous was walking free with one mission. Silence everyone who could expose the truth before the authorities pieced together the full scope of Jolene Green's decades of corruption. The phoenix had risen from the ashes, but now she would have to prove she could survive the flames one more time. The end of the beginning.